All right, folks, we'll go ahead and get started. And as is not only tradition, but right and good and proper, let's pray. Heavenly Father, we are gathered here to study your word, to seek to understand it just a little bit more, just a little bit better, not simply for the pride of our understanding, not simply to be able to say, I know some answers that somebody else doesn't, but to read the Bible and have you speak to us through it, not only in knowledge, but in command, in authority, and in your power, Lord. We ask you, Father, to bless this time, to bless your people, to bless your world. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Okay. The Torah. I want to start, actually, before we jump on in. Does everyone can have a sheet. I think Jake didn't get one. Here you go, Jake. Everyone have a sheet?
Can I have one, please?
No.
Thank you. Love you guys.
Very good. Before you came here tonight, you came here for some reason. It's not just because of my booming voice and pretty face. And so probably you have some questions that have already been percolating in your minds about the Torah. Before we get started, I want to give anyone the opportunity who's got a burning one they want to make sure that we get to tonight. What questions do you have about those first 5 books of the Bible? I'm not going to answer them right now. I just want to recognize that we might have them. We might get to those things. Well, this is going to be a really easy evening then, if everyone already knows everything about the book. Who wrote the Torah? Good question. It depends on who you ask. But if you ask Jesus, Moses. And I figure he's probably the best authority on the topic. So it is actually a very good question. I wasn't sure I was going to cover it. I can't cover it in its entirety because that's an hour-long lecture in and of itself. Most likely, I think the best understanding of who wrote the Torah is it originates from Moses and his time leading Israel. It doesn't mean he penned every word. Almost certainly he was using scribes. He was either dictating some things or simply scribes were paying very close attention, and he was able to they were able to record the message very well and very closely. The reason I put it that way is because the books of Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy all do have distinct styles, and there are sections of them that seem distinct from each other. And so it is unlikely that one human being penned the text. But it is very likely that it all originates from the same source, that is from Moses and from his ministry. It is possible that there are some sections of the book that were later updated for clarity, like during the time of the kings. There will be these little bits and pieces where it's like, this thing wouldn't have been called that at that time, but it was called this later. Probably it was just a scribe was reading through it and they said, the people who are reading this now are going to understand this as this place. You can sit wherever you like, Donna. There's no video, it's just audio. Okay. And so there are critical scholars who are going to say, none of it goes back to the time of Moses. It was all written during the kings as propaganda for David. And these people are silly. They have their own presuppositions that are coming to the text, and I can't unpack every single one of the reasons they're wrong right now. What I can say is Jesus refers to Moses as the one who gave the Torah. I'm just going to trust the Word made flesh. However, in a deeper sense, who wrote the Torah? God. But it's a good question. Are there any other questions at the outset? I said I wouldn't answer them right then and there, but that was one that sort of undergirds a lot of the other stuff. Any other questions right at the outset?
Why are we studying the Torah?
Good question. Any other questions? I'm holding off because that's the first thing I answer.
What are the other names for the Torah?
Does anyone know? So it's called the Torah. It's also called the what? Pentateuch. What do those two words mean?
5.
So Pentateuch, five scrolls, literally. It's Greeks. The Greeks looked at it and said, they wrote it on 5 scrolls. Pentateuch, 5 scrolls. Anyone know what Torah means?
Isn't it scroll?
Law. It's the law. And so when Jesus says the scriptures, that is the law, the Psalms, and the prophets all testify to me, he's saying the Torah, that is the law, the Torah, the prophets, and then everything in between, basically. And so the Torah means law. Now, let's jump in. I'm not hearing any other questions, and I'm not seeing any other hands fly up into the air. Let's tackle the question of why are we studying it in the first place. Thank you, Dave. It's not just because it's the first 5 books and we figured we had to start somewhere, although that is probably a part of it. But why is the Torah significant? Who here is familiar with the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States?
Familiar? Yeah.
They sound familiar. I'm not asking could you recite them, but you know what they are. So what is the purpose of these documents? 1, to define what the United States is. What events, principles, and truths make America what it is. That is what those documents do. That's what they're there for. They define what the United States is. 2, to point the way forward. Without answering every single question, these documents are and should be used to evaluate any steps forward. It's the reason that the judicial branch of the judicial branch of government exists. It's to interpret the Constitution and understand how it drives the country forward. If something happens in the country and it's brought to the courts, their job is to say, does it track back to the Constitution and the Declaration, in particular the Constitution? In a very real way, the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence are a promise from the past to the future that these principles, stories, and truths will be passed down faithfully from generation to generation. They penned these documents and they wrote them down so that they could be handed down and they would endure through the life of the nation. Also, these documents are a promise from the future to the past to honor these principles, stories, and truths in the current age. That's why we have these discussions all the time in the United States. Is it constitutional? Are we upholding that promise that we made to our forefathers, that we would uphold the principles and stories and truths that make America what it is? That is what the Torah is for the people of God, for all intents and purposes. It is the founding document of God's people. These are the first penned books in Jewish Christian history. It defines who God's people are. And if you look on your sheets, actually, you look at the top left corner. I asked the three guys in the room, me, Chris, and Dave, what is the point of the Torah? You see this very much called out in Dave's response, which is to put us in our place, which I thought was a fantastic response. That is, it defines who God's people are. You see that emphasized in what Dave says there. And it points the way forward. You see this emphasized in my response. That is, I literally said to point the way home. Now, we talked about what the word Torah means. The word Torah itself means law. And that is a perfectly good translation of that word. The word is, like, if you pronounce it in Hebrew, it's Torah. We're just saying it with our English accents. I think they would say Torah, but anyway. Perfectly good translation. However, one of the nuances of the word Torah is direction or pointing. So it is rather, it's pointing to a deeper purpose than just to produce a slavish adherence to rules, but rather to show what a holy nation who loves God, it looks like. What a holy nation looks like. And this is mirrored in the New Testament when Jesus delivers the Sermon on the Mount and the apostles provide moral teachings in their letters. The Sermon on the Mount is never intended to be, do this in order to be saved. The Sermon on the Mount is, this is what a holy people looks like. It's going to happen to you as you are saved and being saved. In the same way,
R.C. Sproul in his Dust to Glory series on the entire Bible describes the Torah as being the way to go.
The way to go, exactly.
The way to go.
Yeah.
It's a beacon.
It is.
It is lighting the way to go.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And so when you read the Torah, especially when you get to the law elements, now there are literally just straight up, there is actual just law code in the book, in the 5 scrolls. But we have to read those with an understanding of this is painting the road specifically for the nation, like the national people of Israel, and how to govern themselves. Excuse me. The full and deepest purpose of the Torah and those laws is to point and say, your hearts following after the Lord will fulfill these things without even, or because you want to, not because you've just been told to. And the reason I emphasize that is when you get way into the prophets, a recurring theme, which is best encapsulated in a passage in Isaiah where he says, you worship me with your mouths, but your hearts are far from me. You're saying all the correct words, you're splattering all the correct blood from all the correct animals, but you are ignoring the actual purpose of the law, which is to draw you into communion with me.
And to understand that this wasn't just for the Jews or the nation of Israel, but it's for everyone.
Well, and we'll come to that in just a moment, but you're right. So when I say God's people, I like get out of your heads that this just means the nation of Israel. God's people, like this is for Christians as well. This is for all who have called upon the name of the Lord, the name of Yahweh. Excuse me. So why study the Torah? That's why. It is. They are effectively the founding documents that point the way home, that put us in our place, that define who we are as God's people. Everything else, and you'll see on the left side of your sheets, there's a bullet point under things to remember that starts with the word literally. Literally every other book in the Bible builds on, calls back to, or fulfills the Torah. There is basically no book in the Bible that is not in some way interacting with the Torah. Excuse me. And what I would say about that is, written somewhere on my sheet, right. So, for example, as soon as you get out of the Torah, what's the next book? Joshua. He is conquering and establishing the nation of Israel according to the Torah. David is ruling according to the Torah. The kings of Israel and Judah, after the kingdom split, are forgetting and intermittently returning to the Torah. The Psalms and the Proverbs are applying and remembering and thanking God for the Torah. The prophets are desperately calling people back to the Torah. The Gospels show us how God fulfills the Torah. The letters of the apostles show how Jesus fulfilled the Torah so that you could be pointed to, so that you could be pointed and point to God. And Revelation is the Torah's purpose is complete. We've made it home. And so the whole book of the Bible is all building on, calling back to, or fulfilling the Torah. And so I figure probably a good place, a good reason to start studying it. I want to pause before I jump into the first book, which would be Genesis. Questions? I saw a hand from Jean, or thoughts?
Was the Torah the only words from God available for a long amount of time before more books were written? Wasn't like Job was written?
So that's a good question. So the story of Job is older than most of the events recorded in the Torah. The story of Job dates back to the time of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But it was Job was almost certainly written down after the Torah was written down. So it existed as an oral tradition.
So my question is more of what kind of reference did people have, and for how long was it just those 5 books before
okay, very good
things
question.
Came into play?
So I'll say this, from Joshua through, so let's say the next book that was written and recorded and penned and sort of used in a scriptural way would have been Joshua. And Joshua was almost certainly written maybe a little before or around the time of Samuel. That's when the pen would have hit the paper. And so from the time of the Torah's composition, which is post-Exodus, to the time when Samuel would have been writing, that's several hundred years that the people of God had the Torah and the priesthood, which preserved and interpreted and taught the Torah.
So Well, there were generations, well, maybe not generations, they lived with a long name, but.
Not during that time. It would have been a normal lifespan
Okay.
by our
There were
standards.
generations that's all they knew, and so when you bring something new on the scene, everybody's like, oh, we don't do it that way, that's new.
Right. Well, it's interesting because, and we'll come into that in a minute. So it's the founding document in large part because of what happens in the book of Genesis. And so we'll, when we go through Genesis, let's come back to your question. So like, how is it we understand this existing for what it is, and how did people exist before it? Genesis covers that time period. So we'll come back to that question after we've gone through it. But good question, Gene. Other questions about the Torah as a whole?
So, I mean, I know like the Bible, the way we read it is not necessarily in chronological order,
Mm-hmm.
which holds true for the Torah, right? I mean,
The Torah is almost completely chronological.
it is all, okay.
I'm trying to think. I don't think there's a spot that is not chronological in there. I mean, Leviticus doesn't really cover events; it covers laws, and so it's just happening in the midst of all of this.
Mm-hmm.
But as the events progress, yeah, that would be linear. Trying to think now. You get into an area. You get into problems. You get into asynchronous history. When you hit like Ruth and Judges, because Ruth happens during the time of Judges, but it comes afterwards in the Bible. Esther happens during the later part of the middle part of the prophets, but it comes before the prophets. The prophets all happen during the Kings and Chronicles, but they're listed afterwards. So it's more during the monarchy that you get sort of twists and turns in the chronology. But the Torah is pretty much just start with Adam, or start with in the beginning, and then just straight shot through.
Key words there, in the beginning.
Which we keep coming back to. We'll pick that up with Genesis. Other questions on the Torah as a whole? Alrighty. What is the point of Genesis? Excuse me. Now, for each of these, if you look on the right side, I'm basically just going to be walking through the right side of the sheet from here on out, summarizing the main thrust of each book. This is not going to be, there's going to be some chronological elements to the discussion, but my goal here is not to just say, and then this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens, and this happens. I want to try to point you to the themes that you are observing and having in your mind as you are reading these books of the Bible. Now, I say that, and the beginning of Genesis, those first 11 chapters are so jam-packed, there is going to be a certain amount of chronology, but it'll pick up after that. On the right side there, you will see the name of the book that is familiar to you, and then a slash, and then quotations. The quotations are what the Hebrew name for that book is. So the names that we have, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, are English translations of the Greek words for those books. They're very thematic. So Genesis is all about beginnings. Genesis means beginning. And then we'll cover each one as we go along. But I just wanted to point it out because there's, as we go through, we're going to see the Greek translation has a perfectly reasonable title for it, but the Hebrew title for that scroll helps us put our hat on correctly as we're walking through it. So, what is the point of Genesis? It's in the title, beginnings. When you think of Genesis, you think of beginnings. And I have there the beginning of what? The beginnings of, first of all, everything. This is chapters 1 and 2 of the book. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And I think this is actually the only book of the 5 where the Hebrew title is basically the same as the Greek title. Genesis means beginnings, and then Bereshit is the Hebrew word, which means in the beginning. It's that first word of the book. So Genesis, in the beginning, it's the beginning of everything. Genesis 1 and 2, all about creation. Now, the reason this is significant is because if we're focusing on beginnings, there are 2 things that we can draw from that. One, beginnings lays the foundation for everything. What comes afterwards is not going to contradict what the nature of the thing is at its core, at its beginning. A human person, for example, from the moment that an egg is fertilized, that is a distinctly human. It is the beginning of a human life, and what comes after that is not going to contradict what it is at the beginning. It will grow from it, but it will not contradict it. And so we immediately see, that's why these first 2 chapters are so significant for the rest of the book, because it shows you God's purpose and design for everything. Excuse me. So chapters 1 and 2 show us that everything has been made for the glory of God and for man to rule over. The reason I say that is because you look at Genesis 1 and it's this was good, this was good, this was good, this was good. He makes mankind. This was very good. Or tov tov in Hebrew. Good, good. And his first command is what? Be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, and subdue it. He is creating man not just to be there as little happy puppets and little friendly pets, but as partners in ruling creation. Now, when I say partner, I don't mean equal with him. I mean we're partnering with him. He's like we are our own beings that he is sharing with us. And the purpose of that is for us to be mirrors. We are reflecting his glory out into creation, and any glory that comes our way, we reflect back to him because he is worthy of the glory and we are not. But we are called to be partners with him. And so, Genesis 1 and 2, God made it all for his glory and for man to rule over, and it gives us our purpose. Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it. Cultivate and protect the garden and spread the garden, like we've been talking about at New Hope. Genesis is also the beginning of our sin. And there's a lot to be said about sin, but it's very significant, I think, that first sin is brought about by a couple of things. It's brought about by, did God really say? So, beginning to distrust God, because what is faith? What's another word for faith in the Bible terms? Trust. Right. And so sin obviously would come from distrust seeping in. You see that throughout the rest of the book, the rest of the Bible. So distrust, it comes from forgetting the will of God, because Eve misquotes the Lord, if you remember. And it comes from pride. I do want to be like him. I could do this. I could rule this world and my life better than him. And so we see where sin begins in that way, where we see where our sin begins. Excuse me. But then right out the gate, as soon as the beginnings of our sin are revealed, the beginnings of God's promises come onto play. What is God's first promise? I will put enmity between the snake, that is the deceiver, and the woman, and between her seed and his seed. And her descendant will crush the snake's head, and the snake will bruise his heel. Sort of a curious thing. I wonder what that means. We'll come back to that in several months. But God's promise of, you sinned, immediately, there's consequences and a promise of, but I'm going to fix this. I will defeat that which brought the sin into the world. I will fix this. But it can't just be a snap your fingers and everything goes back to normal, because he does not want automatons. He doesn't want robots. He doesn't want little playthings that he can just say, whoops, all right, well, burn it all and start over. Flood it all and start over. We'll come back to that. He recognizes, he decides, he chooses, it will be a long road back, because I'm actually going to build up these people. I'm going to show sin and Satan what you did will only produce something more beautiful in the end. So it's a long road back, but he starts with it with his first promise. His promises continue. He promises, I will do this. Sin rears its head once again, and then you get the effects of sin. Not just the cause of sin, but you get the beginning of the effects of sin. Families fall apart. Husbands and wives are at odds with each other. Brothers kill each other. There are tyrants rise up in the land. These are Cain's descendants, and they strike down those who offend them. They set themselves up as gods in their own right. You hit Genesis chapter 6, and the hearts of man were all evil all the time. Then you get the beginning. Along with God's promises, you get God's God's promise then continues through Noah. Justice hits the earth. The story of Noah is significant, obviously, because it's a very cool story and it's easy to tell kids with little boats. But what it shows is God saying right out the gate, this is what the world actually deserves based on who I am and what you have done. Because who is God? God made everything. God designed everything. God gave everything its purpose. Sin is just moving away from life itself. God is life. I'm the way, the truth, and the life. Sin is moving away from life. As you stray and stray and stray, that's why Paul says the wages of sin is death. Doesn't mean every sin gets you killed. It just means all sin points away from life. Taken to its conclusion, flood. God is showing you this is what sin deserves. But I am merciful, and I am not giving up on my people, so I will save Noah and his family. Excuse me. Then, out of the Noah story, you actually get another example of someone being ashamed and naked. Noah gets drunk, just like Adam in the garden. And instead of God covering him with leaves, you get his children covering him with a blanket. And so now a new creation has begun, and God is handing over little bits and pieces of his authority. He's not giving up the authority, but he's designating it to people. You get the promise to Noah that civil government shall exist now, and then from there, sin continues. It's restrained a little bit now because governments exist and people can kill. Like you can rightly submit, bring justice through these things. But sin continues, and mankind gets a little full of its britches and says, that snake probably was right in the garden. We could be gods. Let's build a big tower to show that off to the world. The Lord then humbles them, sends them out, making that's the origin of the nations. That's the first 11 chapters of Genesis. The reason I went step by step is because there is so much jam-packed in there. And then there's a little bit of connective tissue with that initial promise to Abraham. And this is the beginning of God's family. Bullet point number 4 there. And I'm going to open quickly to Genesis chapter 12. So you have the nations then spread out. Another great evil has occurred. 1 second, Dave. Another great evil has occurred. And the Lord has humbled the people of the earth. He produces the nations out of it. And then immediately, once again, we have the Lord's promise to take something bad that has happened and turn it into good. That's Exodus, not Genesis. Genesis chapter 12, verses 1 through 3. Now the Lord said to Abram, "Go forth from your country, from your relatives, and from your father's house to the land which I will show you. I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you, and make your name great, so that you shall be a blessing. And I will bless those who bless you, and the ones who curse you I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth will be blessed." So he sends people out, producing the nations of the world. And he says, this right here is my family. And from my family, I will bless all of them. And I saw a hand over here from Dave, and we'll pick up with Abraham.
Okay. Before going too much further, I think it would be good if you were to give a little bit of an explanation as to why you're biting off such a big chunk.
Because so the purpose of this really is to give a high-level overview so that when you go back and study or want to dig deeper, you can do so with more of a foundation to figure it out. Excuse me. And when you're listening to either Pastor Kevin or me preach on a Sunday, we're in Judges. What are you in right now? Matthew. Yeah, there you go.
Which we need this too.
Yeah. Well, Matthew in particular builds so much on the message of the Torah. And Judges is completely, as we've been discovering in the sermons, is what happens when a nation forgets who they are, where they came from, and the messages of the Torah. And so why are we biting off such a big chunk? It's because this is not to go deep. This is just to equip and point you to deeper resources. One of the things I'm going to do right at the end, is, somebody remind me, please. I want to have you write down some good resources for you to take away with you. So hold on to that thought, Dave.
And I was just, you and I had a conversation months ago
Mhm.
about looking at the big picture. I'm 75 years old.
Yeah.
And you reach a point where you can say, okay, I've heard 3:16 too many times in my life. Going back to that verse, how does all of it fit together? What is it that pulls Genesis together with Exodus, together with Revelation? How does it all fit? And I've never heard a pastor, essentially take the grand panoramic view and paint that picture. So it was like,
Dave's been trying to get me to do this for like a year, and I finally broke down. And I think it's a great idea. I've been persuaded. It's not just I'm doing it to make Dave happy. So,
and it has forced me to do some research on my own, and there are audios and videos out there that do take the panoramic view.
yes, and that's one of the things I'm going to try to point you towards at the end of this, because, like I said, this is real high level that we're going to be finishing up with here. So just bear with me. So God's beginning of everything, beginning of our sin, beginning of God's promises, beginning of God's family, that would be Abraham. The remainder of the book, chapters 11 through 50, cover one family, the family of Abraham. Abraham bears Isaac, Isaac bears Jacob, Jacob bears, all the tribes of Israel, but in particular Joseph, who covers the main thrust of the last bit there. You'll see in the middle column on your sheets, what I've tried to do is group chapter sections in each book into general themes. And so chapters 12 through 23 are all about Abraham's faith. Paul harps very strongly on this, and Abraham believed God, and it was credited to him as righteousness. The faith of Christ, our faith in Christ, is most akin to the faith of Abraham. It is the faith in God, the trust in God, is that which saves. Why would that be the case? Well, because what went wrong was distrust. How do you solve that? You grow in trust. You choose to trust, and you grow in that trust. So we'll be coming back to that theme as we continue on. Then you're going to be finding Isaac's fathering, which is mediocre at best, where his children, Jacob and Esau, are at odds with each other all the time. And Jacob, however, is the one who takes seriously the covenant of God with his father and with his grandfather. Esau is a little bit more loosey-goosey with how he goes about his life. Jacob is not a good person by most standards. His name literally means deceiver. But he is the one who takes more seriously the promise of God. And so he is blessed, and in him you get the 12 tribes of Israel. And I'm not going to name them all because I always forget one or two and it drives me insane. But he's the one who gives, through his family, gives birth to the 12 tribes of Israel. And the last section is Joseph's forgiveness. We are familiar with the story of Joseph, generally speaking. Sold into slavery from his brothers. The Lord orchestrates his life from there through hell and high water to become the second most powerful man in Egypt. He saves not only Egypt from famine, but as well saves his siblings who had betrayed him all those years ago. And right at the end of the book, at the beginning of the book, you have what I think is probably the key verse. This is what Dave pointed out. In the beginning, God. It's just the first part of that verse. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. But you could say that about everything in the book of Genesis. In the beginning, God created everything. In the beginning, God promised to bring us out of our sin. It is God who will bring us out of our sin. It is God who chooses the family of Noah, of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. It is God who delivers them. It is God who saves them. It is God who brings Joseph out of slavery and out of prison to save his people. It is God who brings the family out of Canaan into Egypt for a time. So, in the beginning, God. Right at the end of the book, you have another incredibly significant verse. I believe it's chapter 50. I think it's verse 20. I can probably find it. I have the Bible here for a reason. Yeah, got it. Chapter 50, verse 20. This is Joseph speaking to his brothers who are afraid that he's going to take vengeance on them now that their dad is dead. And Joseph replies and says, "Do not be afraid, for am I in God's place? As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, in order to bring about this present result, to preserve many people alive." Which brings us to the last bullet point there. This is the beginning of the way back. Ultimately, it is forgiveness, grace, if you will. So the Lord extends mercy, he extends grace, and in Joseph, you see a shadow of what is to come in our Lord Jesus Christ. You see, a great and evil thing was done to Jesus. It was meant to harm him. It was meant to shut him up. It was meant to put him down. But the Lord intended it for good, to bring about the current result, the salvation of many people. And so in Genesis, you see all sorts of beginnings. Beginning of everything, of our sin, of God's promises, of God's family, and the beginning of the way back. Questions on the book of Genesis? Is there anything that didn't get covered in Genesis that you're like, oh, I guess we sort of sped over that part? Any confusing bits in the book that you've always wondered about? You have a thought, Dad. You could say it.
No, I can't. I really can't, because it's just too silly and it'll just drag us into a pit of crazy. So I won't do that to you. I like the high view.
In the beginning, God created everything,
Mm-hmm.
both good and the possibility of evil.
Mm-hmm.
And man chose poorly.
And man chose poorly. But God knew that that was going to happen, so he provided the way out. You know,
I'm not going to quote The Lord of the Rings. But if you want me to later, I can. Just ask me. So that is the book of Genesis. Next up is the book of Exodus. We know it as the Exodus. It's called Exodus in the Greek because, well, that's what it's about. It's about them escaping. Exodus means the movement of, the movement out. And so that's what it's about. The Hebrew name is actually taken from the very first sentence. Almost all of these are taken from the first sentence in the book, but that's significant. The Hebrew is called names. That's what the book is called in the Hebrew Bible, the Hebrew Tanakh. And that's from the first verse. Now these are the names of the sons of Israel who came to Egypt with Jacob. They came each one with his household. And Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Benjamin, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, all the persons who came from the loins of Jacob were with him. The reason I listed that off is because that's the tribes, and I don't have to remember them off the top of my head now.
That doesn't have Joseph.
It doesn't, but it'll be Manasseh and Ephraim. Those are the children of Joseph. So I think it's kind of significant or very, very beautiful that it's called Exodus in Greek and names in Hebrew, because it is in Exodus that you see who God is and who Israel is in relation. Like, what are God's people essentially? Who is God? And we'll see there, those first two, the main thrust of Exodus. God saves, we are saved. God saves, we are saved. The reason this is so beautiful and so significant is because it really does do a good job of defining, just in a phrase, what the people of God are. We need salvation, and we are saved. What does that say? Positively, it puts us in our place because it reminds us that we are loved and valuable enough to the Lord to be saved. And negatively, it puts us in our place to remind us that we needed to be saved. And so it's a very good reminder of what you are. I think sometimes in Christian circles, we err one way or the other. And in Baptist circles, I know I can be guilty of this in my own thoughts. We err on the side of, I am a sinner, I am in need of salvation. I'm a sinner, I'm in need of salvation. That is true. I was dead in sin, and I needed salvation, and the Lord has given it to me, and he continues to provide it to me. But also, what is true is the Lord loves me, and I am valuable to him. I am his image bearer. I am not dirt. I'm a human being. I am made in the image of God, and I am so loved that he decided to save me. And so that really, it's a reminder of who Israel is. And you think to yourself, when we look at Israel's history from this point on, and we'll get into Exodus as a bulk book in a moment, where do they usually go wrong very quickly? In Judges, it's extremely clear. And they began going after other gods because they forget it's Yahweh who saves, and we are saved by Yahweh. It's why I have
in the process of being saved.
It's why I have the key verse there as chapter 20, verse 2. This is the first commandment, or the first half of the first commandment. What's the first thing, that first command that God gives to his people? I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. I am he who saves. You are they who have been saved. That is who I am and who you are. I don't like the song because it is monumentally repetitive. But the song Good, Good Father, are we familiar with it? The chorus of it goes, you're a good, good father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are. And I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. Names, as the title of the book, really reminds you, your name is like, it's your identity. It's who you are. You are saved. And the next bullet point there, you are being saved. And so let's walk through a little bit what we mean by that. Obviously, in the book of Exodus, you have the story of Moses. So if you look at the middle column there, God saves Moses over the first 6 chapters. He reveals himself. He gets him out of Egypt after he kills a guy. Big mistake. He also saves him from being killed in the slaughter of the innocents by the Pharaoh. Gets him out of Egypt to go meet his father-in-law and his wife, Zipporah. He reveals himself to Moses and sends him back to Egypt. Chapters 7 through 15, that's Moses and Aaron participating with God to get the Hebrews out, the Israelites out of Egypt, and into their land. So that's really chapter 7 through 15 effectively is the Exodus. That's where Moses comes and says, let my people go. The plagues occur, which are incredible in their own right. I'm not going to go over them in detail right now. And then they get out. Excuse me. Verses 16 through 18, they're wandering about, and immediately who's complaining? Israel. Weren't things nicer way back
I
when?
liked being a slave.
Yeah,
We had 3 square meals a day.
that's right. But in those chapters, what does God provide? Manna to eat. So the Lord saves Moses, God saves Israel, God then sustains Israel, and then 19 through 34, that's where you hit the law code in the book of Exodus. In this section, God schools Israel. And this is where we get to, we are being saved, and this is what salvation looks like. We are saved. God gets them out of slavery. Romans chapter 6, you are no longer slaves to sin. The rest of the book of Exodus is the covenant God makes with Israel. He's saying, this is who I am, and because of who I am, he who saves, and because of who you who are saved, this is how you live with me. This is how you show the world me. This is how you fulfill that promise I made to Abraham back in Genesis. You will be a blessing to the families of the earth. You will be a beacon of light in the region. You'll be a beacon of light in all the earth. This is what a holy people looks like. And again, this is mirrored by Paul in Romans chapter 6. You are no longer slaves to sin, Therefore, present yourselves freely, free as you are, as slaves to righteousness. So the first half of Exodus effectively is, you are no longer slaves. The second half of Exodus is, you are now my people. You are now my people, my light, that light that I promised to Abraham. Therefore. So God saves, we are saved, and we are being saved. And then when we talk about the law, salvation looks like this. Who is saved by keeping every jot and tittle of the law? No one. And yet, who is saved because every jot and tittle of the law was kept?
All who come to him in faith.
Everyone. Because who kept every jot and tittle of the law? Jesus. And so, when we talked about earlier on, Exodus does both of those things. It puts us in our place. Who are you? Who am I? And it points the way home. It doesn't provide the absolute, like this is the answer. The law is not the answer. The law points to the answer and says, you will know the one who is salvation when he looks like this. In the Gospel of Matthew, you Emmaus who are listening to Pastor Kevin on any given Sunday, the Gospel of Matthew, one of Matthew's main points, and you see this especially in chapters 3, 4, and 5, 3 through 7, Matthew makes the very strong argument, Jesus is Israel, as Israel should have been. To look at Lord of the Rings again, when Gandalf comes back, he's Gandalf the White, and they say, I thought you were Saruman. And he says, I am Saruman, but rather Saruman as he should have been. Jesus is that for Israel. Jesus is the new Israel. That is one of the main thrusts of the Gospel of Matthew. And it's going to be really interesting when we look at the four Gospels, how they each treat Jesus as, like, what's the main point they're trying to get across about Jesus? That is absolutely Matthew's main point. Jesus is true Israel. And how are we bound to true Israel? Is it by bloodline and birth? It is by faith. That faith of Abraham. Excuse me. So that's the book of Exodus. God saves, we are being saved, and this is what salvation looks like. Any questions on the book of Exodus? Next one up, this is hurdle number 1 for your Bible reading plans in a year. If you get through Leviticus, Numbers usually does you in. Leviticus. The word in Greek is Leviticus. It's the book about the Levites. It's a book about the priests. The Levites are one of the tribe of Levi, one of the 12 tribes of Israel. In the book of Exodus, they are given, excuse me, they are given the authority as priests in the nation. So it is their job, it is the Levites' job to come to the Torah day after day, year after year, teach it, understand it, and keep it. It is their job to preserve that which is commanded and that which is told to Israel through the Torah. It is their job to execute the priestly system of sacrifices and whatnot. That's what Leviticus is about. The other 12 tribes are to take the land and be lit up, as it were. Or to be on fire for the Lord is the idea. I did skip over the last little bit of Exodus, and my apologies. So you have the law in chapters 19 through 34, and then chapters 35 through 40 is all about God staying with Israel. Israel continues to make it very, we'll say, there's a saint from the 2nd century named Ignatius, and he has a line in one of his writings where he says, if God treated us as we treat each other, it would be all over for us. And that is nowhere more evident than in Exodus and Numbers, because constantly Israel complains and complains and complains and complains, and the Lord punishes and punishes and punishes because he's a father. He is teaching them, he's schooling them about how to be. But ultimately, at the end of Exodus, what does he do? I'm going to tell you how to build my house. Those last 5 chapters are all about building the tabernacle, building the tent of meeting, where his presence comes and palpably sits in the midst of Israel. And fascinatingly, as we jump into Leviticus, when the people gathered on the Day of Atonement, which we'll talk about as we get to, I'm going to wait till we get to the Day of Atonement, but that leads right in. So God stays with Israel. This is my house. This is how you are to come near to me. If you want to visit somebody, where do you go? You go to their house. How are you then to come near to me? Book of Leviticus. So Leviticus, it's the book about the Levites. The Hebrew name is "and he called." And that's because of the first verse in the book. Let me take a look at it here. Open up to Leviticus chapter 1. Then the Lord called to Moses and spoke to him from the tent of meeting, saying, and he goes on. Right there, you have once again, there's a 20th century Hebrew rabbi named Heschel, Abraham Joshua Heschel. And he wrote a book that's very famous, and it's called God in Search of Man. It is God who calls to Moses. It is God who initiates everything, coming back to, in the beginning, God. And he called. You can also picture it as if your friend is coming up the street and you want him to come by, what do? You call from your house and say, "Come to me." That's what's happening here. The book of Leviticus, we often read it, and it often destroys our Bible reading plans because we look at it and we say, this just seems to be all about sacrifice. Where do I splatter the blood? How much fat do I eat? Do I eat the fat on this offering or do I not? Do the priests get that one or does it go to the family? It just looks like sacrifice, 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 sacrifice. Lots and lots of blood. The Hebrew word for sacrifice is properly translated sacrifice. But when we think of sacrifice, what we think of is sort of the pagan idea of appeasement, and that's it. It's you kill the animal as sort of a payment to God, and that keeps his wrath off of me. And indeed, a little bit of that is happening. But the Hebrew word has connotations of to draw near, to draw close. The book of Leviticus is how we draw near to God, how God's people draw near to him. And I think, again, it is significant that it is not simply that we decide one day of whole cloth to draw near to him. What happens first? And he called. He calls. We respond by drawing near. And so the book of Leviticus, those first 7 chapters are all about how we draw near to God, that is through the sacrifices. It lists off the various sacrifices that you would do in ancient Israel to draw near to God. Excuse me. And you think about it, this is true in the modern day as well. I mean, we don't slaughter animals anymore, and we don't do that because the Lord Jesus fulfilled that which was in this law. It's not that it was done away with, it's that the Lord Jesus fulfilled it. Sacrifices are no longer necessary because we're already covered in the blood of the Lamb. But when you talk about wanting to draw near to God, sometimes people will say, I just feel so distant from God. Sometimes I think that way. I feel so distant from God. And the reality is, it's entirely possible that you just haven't sacrificed anything recently. And I don't mean that in a sense of it's like a transactional problem. I mean that in the sense of how do you trust him? How do you say, I trust God and I'm in relationship with him if I am not giving up of something else? If I'm not giving up on my own pride, if I'm not giving up on my own time. If I want to go spend time with Dad, I have to sacrifice time somewhere else. So maybe that's in prayer. Maybe that's in study. Maybe that's in going to church. And maybe it's in sacrificing your sense of comfort to go and do what he's told you to do. One of the reasons why we went through the spiritual disciplines last year here at New Hope. It's why we had the spiritual disciplines conference that you guys were a part of at Emmaus as well. These are means by which we almost mimic the mentality of the Levites. I want to give up something so that I can draw closer to the Lord. Fasting does nothing if your goal is to look holy, if your goal is to lose weight. You might lose weight, but you're not going to draw near. Fasting does something when you say, I'm putting that away, and I'm using that. I'm using my hunger now to focus on the Lord and to trust in him, trust in his strength, not mine. And so, excuse me, I think sometimes when we hear about sacrifice or think about sacrifice, we think only in terms of slaughtering the lamb. But we don't think enough in terms of those principles carry forward. The Torah describes who we are, even if the lambs and the goats are no longer a thing for us. So, how we draw near to God, and then chapters 8 through 10, how we are led near to God. These are the qualifications for the priests. And again, we see this mimicked in the apostles and in Jesus Christ. Paul has several areas where he gives qualifications not for priests, but for elders, for those who lead you in coming near to the Lord. Pastors ought to be a certain way. Elders ought to be a certain way, so that we are shepherds, shepherding near to the green pastures, as it were. Then you hit chapters 11 through 15, how we are near to God. This is often called the holiness code. If God is holy, how am I going to be being near to him? I'm going to be holy, which is why the key verse, chapter 19, verse 2, you shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. And I would connect this all the way back to Genesis once again. It does not say, you have to be holy because I'm holy. It's, you shall be holy. Let there be light, and there was light. You will be holy. Do we think that's not going to come to pass? If we are near to the Lord? His presence is in the tabernacle, in this particular case. His presence is in the temple, as it would be later constructed. If you draw near to him through the means that he has given, you will be holy. Now, where is the temple today? What does the Apostle Paul say about the temple?
We are the temple.
Yes. Where you walk is holy ground. It ought to be holy ground. It is. If you are near to the Lord, when I say near to the Lord, I don't mean you're feeling his spirit or anything along those lines. I mean, have you put your faith in Christ Jesus? Have you been washed in the blood of the Lamb? Where you walk is holy ground. Who you are is being made holy. Coming back to the Exodus. You have been saved, and you are being saved. More and more and more. Well, this is my point. Sometimes it doesn't feel that way, but excuse me. That's a little bit what those first couple of chapters are about. Is like, first of all, we can't depend on the feeling. We depend on, what does the Lord say worships me? What does the Lord say draws me near? Whatever I'm feeling, I can still hear and obey. Right? And then I'm going to skip chapter 16 and 17 for just a moment. Chapters 18 through 22, that is how we are holy with God. This is, you are different. The word holy simply means set apart. You are different than the people around you. You will look different than the nations around you. They're going to hate you for it, but you're going to be a light to the world. Sounds very similar to something Jesus says to his people. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. And then the final couple of chapters, these are the feasts. This is how you celebrate being with God. And people will say, some people actually in the modern day have disdain for like holidays and things. I think it's an absolutely holy thing to do, because we ought to be celebratory about what the Lord has done and is doing through us. There ought to be times in the calendar for God's people to simply come together and say, God, you are good. Let us remember especially today that you became man on Christmas. Let us remember especially today that you gave yourself and rose again on the third day. Let us remember especially today that you came in the Spirit into your people, making us each a temple on Pentecost. Like, it's a good thing. None of that is in Leviticus, but that is the principle carried forward. It is good when you are near God, celebrate with God. Excuse me. And so Leviticus is all about, we draw near to God because first he draws near to us. Looking at the right side here. God's light shines out of our darkness. This is very important. What's happening in the sacrifices? You're killing a goat, you're killing a sheep, you're killing something. Blood is being spilled. Life is ending. Why? Because you sinned. You mucked up. You're a sinner. You are deserving of the wrath that animal has just received for you. And yet, in so participating in that sacrifice, you are showing yourself, you are showing the priest, you are showing the nation of Israel, and you are showing the people around Israel the mercy of God. God's light shines out of our darkness. This comes back again to Paul. Does that mean we ought to sin more greatly so that grace may increase? No. But it does mean we trust the Lord with our every part. Even when we muck up, we know that we can still, as we turn back to the Lord for forgiveness, we are glorifying him because his mercy is now on display. And lastly, we are mirrors, like I was talking about back in Genesis. With all of that said, the very center of the Torah is a little passage, 2 chapters, really like a chapter and a half, chapter 16 and 17, about the Day of Atonement. The reason it's significant is at the center. I think Hebrews would often construct things with the most important stuff dead center. At the center of the book of Leviticus is the Day of Atonement. The Day of Atonement is, we recognize that all of these sacrifices every year, each day we're going to miss some things. And so we have one day, Yom Kippur, if you've ever heard that in Hebrew, Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, where the priest is now going to offer one sacrifice for the whole of the nation of Israel to cover all of those sins that we missed for the year. The priest first makes a sacrifice for himself. Interestingly, any other time that the high priest in Israel is addressing the people of Israel, he's wearing a magnificent golden robe, beautiful gems, and an ephod. Why is that? It's not because the guy is important. It's because he is God's representative to the people. When the people are looking at the high priest, they should see gleamingness to remind them of that they are addressing God. This is the mediator between them and God, right?
Is that where the Catholic Church gets that?
Yes, a little bit.
Okay.
But you have the high priest who every other day of the year dressed in beautiful robes. On Yom Kippur, it's the high priest's job to first make a sacrifice for himself to cleanse himself, and then he, the one time that year, goes into the very center of the temple, the Holy of Holies, where the Ark of the Covenant is, where the Torah is written, where the tablets on stone are written. That's where the presence of God is most concentrated. You can't go in there any other day of the year. Some of Aaron's kids tried it once, didn't go well. On that day, the high priest wears rags. Because every other day of the year, he is facing the people as God's representative. On that day, he is facing God as the people's representative. And it's a reminder, you save, we are saved. And we are being saved. On the Day of Atonement, what happens is there are 2 goats. One goat is slaughtered. This is the goat that essentially takes the punishment and represents the sacrifice for all of Israel. And there's a second goat. Anyone ever heard the phrase scapegoat? It comes from the Day of Atonement. There's a second goat, which effectively the high priest lays his hands upon the goat and transfers all the sins of Israel onto the goat and sends it into the wilderness. Probably it will be eaten, but the point is it goes away. It has been sent out of the presence of God. Jesus, in his death and resurrection, is both goats. He is killed, taking our punishment, for the punishment that brought us peace was upon him, and by his wounds we are healed. And all the sin is laid upon him. My God, why have you forsaken me? And he takes that sin out of the presence of God. He is both goats. Smack dab in the center of the Torah, in the middle of Leviticus, is a picture of Jesus and what he does on the cross. On the Day of Atonement, the people of Israel gather around the tent of meeting. The tent of meeting is roughly a square. Some tribes go here, some tribes go here, some tribes go here, some tribes go here. Interestingly, the largest set of people, as far as pure population, go here, meaning what you actually get on the Day of Atonement is the people of Israel arranged in a cross, like what we would understand as a Roman cross. Was that intended by God? I'm not the Holy Spirit, I can't tell you. But everything else seems to point to this is what salvation will look like. Jesus Christ.
And he created everything.
Yes. In the beginning, God. Questions on the book of Leviticus?
It's just so much fun to read about all of the body. Leviticus.
Yes. Well, this is true. And what I'm hoping this overview does is allow you to look at it and say, like, okay, I remember that it's supposed to be about this. What am I seeing here that points me back to drawing near? Like, how does the manner in which the grain offering happens, how am I celebrating? How am I drawing near to the Lord? How am I responding to his call? These sorts of things. I've said, actually, in our last time, Veronica was here for that, the goal of this series is not to answer every single bit of historical question that you have, because there are certain things. We're separated from the Bible by time and language and all sorts of other things. So there are some things that you read and you're just not going to understand. This is not going to help you understand because it's a weird historical oddity. But this will help you understand, like, why the heck am I reading about this? Why is this in here about the sacrifices? I get that you can understand it's detailed because that's what the people of Israel were to do. You need to have actual instructions. Any engineer can tell you that. Make it idiot proof.
And when you look at the sacrificial system, when you look at all the different sacrifices and all the offerings that are made, and you do it with what you just described, when you do it with that thought process, how do I see Jesus in this? Because he is in every single one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Every single one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And when you start to read it that way, hopefully, for me, this is what happened. I started to read it that way, and I started to get excited and go, oh, look at that. That's
reading and understanding the sacrifices of Leviticus. I might use a big word. It transformed how I receive communion.
Yeah.
This is my body. This is my blood.
I think all the sacrifices are beautiful too because they take into account the wealthy and the poor.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, that everybody has the opportunity to bring it.
Yes, and as you read through it, that's one of the things you'll notice. Mom is pointing to a very particular point. There is no monetary threshold. Like it literally says in several of the sacrifices, you bring. I'm going to butcher it if you'll pardon the pun. But let's say it might be like you bring a ram, but if you don't have a ram, you bring 2 sparrows. And it's like, yeah, every person, high and low born, has access to the presence of God to draw near to the Lord.
Mary and Joseph brought birds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They didn't have a ram or a calf or a goat.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of these things, what you're going to find in the time of Jesus is this, what I've been talking about, the Torah is not for. The Torah was then being used as this set of rules to legalistically run everything. It's robotic adherence. And that's actually why you get the money changers in the temple. Is that started as you come to you come to Jerusalem, you don't have the proper sacrifice to bring with you, but it's okay, we have some merchants, and they originally were outside the temple, like in Jerusalem, maybe even outside the walls of Jerusalem. Hey, you can come buy your 2 sparrows from me so you have the proper sacrifice to bring to the Lord. It's still a sacrifice because you're giving money, even if you don't have the animal itself. And then year after year, generation after generation, those money changers and those people moved closer and closer into the temple. And so by the time Jesus comes on the scene, the money changers themselves, it's entirely a profiteering scheme. And it's a tragedy, and that's one of the reasons Jesus says, this is my Father's house.
It's also wasn't Jesus angry because all of the commercialism was there, and the room for the people to come was now taken up with all of that.
Mm-hmm.
So the people could not come to the temple.
The people can no longer draw near.
Yeah, they couldn't come close.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So one goat is slaughtered, the other is sent into the wilderness, which brings us to Numbers. It's the most unfortunate Greek name. It makes sense because it begins with a census. There's lots of numbers in the book of Numbers as you read through it. The Hebrew name is in the wilderness. Then the Lord spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai, in the tent of meeting, on the first of the second month. That is significant because why does Israel persist in the wilderness? Because they disobeyed God. Because they didn't trust him to take the land of Canaan. And so the Lord is speaking to Moses in the wilderness, and yet in the tent of meeting, in the tabernacle. So this is actually really lovely. No matter where you are, you can still draw near to the Lord. No matter from whence you've come, you can still draw near to the Lord. The people of Israel are in disobedience. They are in the wilderness. They're being punished. And God is still in his temple. You can still draw near to the Lord. Actually, I was talking to John Jordan about this recently. Their men's Bible study group recently went through the book of Judges and then into Ruth. And the book of Judges, as we're seeing on Sunday mornings, horrifying book. Just a horrible vortex of despair. And he was like, at the end of it, he goes, Will, I mean, come on. this is just horrible. And then they read Ruth. And I talked to him the next week. And he goes, I could read Ruth all day. What a great person. Boaz is fantastic. It's a fantastic little, it's such an uplifting story after Judges. Ruth happens during Judges. This is another example of no matter where you are, no matter how horrifying it is out there, draw near to God's temple. Draw near to him. So the book of Numbers. When you think of Numbers, think we are sojourners awaiting our home. And this reminds us of the Apostle Peter. We are sojourners ourselves, waiting for the kingdom of God in its fullness. We depend more on God's grace than we depend on our righteousness. In the wilderness. Wilderness to the Hebrew was the picture of what sin does. Wilderness is untamed. Wilderness is unfruitful. It's just arid, broken, chaotic land. In Genesis, what is the purpose of man? Be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, and subdue it. Cultivate the garden. Guard the garden. Spread the garden. That is, bring everything into order. Wilderness in and of itself is a picture of what sin does. Doesn't mean that wilderness exists because sin exists. It's just to say it is an image of what sin does. It is unfruitful. It is chaotic. It has no purpose to it. It's just in the way. That's why the wilderness is used in Hebrew poetry and in this as well, I would say. Excuse me. And so Israel, being in disobedience, being tasked to wander the wilderness, the book of Numbers is all about God preparing his people for his kingdom. Nowhere else in the Torah are you going to find more of God's reprimands on his people than in Numbers. And it's because they continue to go the way of the snake, as it were. They continue to think to themselves, wouldn't it be better if we went back? Wouldn't it be better if we disobeyed? Couldn't we figure it out a little bit better? And the Lord repeatedly shows grace with punishment. Just like Noah, there was punishment with grace. And so there's punishment in order to teach. If you have a child, you can't just allow. That's not love. That's horrifying. You're going to produce a monster. You punish in order to teach, and you show grace in order to endure. Because only punishment breaks the spirit. Grace builds up. And so the book of Numbers, when you're reading through it, that's a book, once you get through the census and all the numbers stuff, that's the book that most makes you go, what is wrong with these people? And I will quote R.C. Sproul back to you and say, what is wrong with you people? We have the same problem. Wouldn't it be better if? Wasn't it better when? It seems no different now that we're with God. The Lord reprimands in order to guide, and he gives grace in order to help us endure. Excuse me. This is especially important because the book of Leviticus and the book of Exodus, with all the law therein, points the way home. It points the way to God. It points the way to draw near. And you could get in your head, if that's it, then we can do that. Let's follow these rules. Let us draw near to the Lord. We can follow that path home. We can get back to God. And Numbers very quickly disillusions you of that. No, you can't. You can't depend on your righteousness. You must depend on God's grace. At several points in the book of Numbers, God had every right to wipe Israel off the face of the earth. But he doesn't. And frequently, it's in conversation with Moses. The Lord will say, "That's it, Moses. These people are stiff-necked. I'm gonna leave them here." And Moses will say, "No, Lord, don't do that. Please punish me instead," and all these sorts of things. And it's what's happening there is God is not only reprimanding Israel, but he's reprimanding Moses' leadership, and he's teaching Moses. It's like, you continue to walk away from me. You as the leader and they as the people. You continue walking away from me. I will now show you. I'm not going to tell you. If that's what you want, I will just leave. And then it's that snap into place like, no, that's not what we want. I don't want you to leave.
How many times do they all go, yes, we're going to do everything you tell us to?
Mm-hmm. That's why the key verse we have here is chapter 14, verse 18. This is actually in conversation between Moses and the Lord. That Moses is saying, let the people, when you spare Israel again, all the people of the land will say, the Lord is slow to anger and abundant in mercy, forgiving wrongdoing and violation of his law, but he will by no means leave the guilty unpunished. We've been talking about recently in the book of Judges as well with the story of Abimelech. We as God's people have abundant hope in his mercy and in his grace and in his forgiveness. We also have hope in his wrath, because his wrath is what destroys sin. His grace is what saves us from that destruction. Sin must be destroyed. And in his love, I will be saved. We will be saved.
And this is where it gets personal.
Mm-hmm.
Where we look upon it that we are not just recipients of his grace, but we are still sinners,
Mm-hmm.
Who are being sanctified. But we're still the recipients of his wrath. We will die.
Mm-hmm.
We will at some point, bow our knees to the point where we drop dead, and we don't like to think about that. But
No.
the reality of what it is to be a Christian is to think about the fact that we are just as deserving of being cast out of the garden as Adam and Eve.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think maturing as a Christian is realizing Adam didn't do anything that I wouldn't have done. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And so walking through the book of Numbers. I prefer In the Wilderness. It's just a cooler title than Numbers. Chapters 1 through 4, it's all about preparing his people to come into the land. They have the rules, they have how to draw near, they have the temple, they have the priesthood, they have all these things. Now he's actually preparing the people. You have the teaching, now get prepped. So chapters 1 through 4, establishing the church and state. Now really in this case, they're very similar. It's basically one and the same. Israel was a theocracy that is run by the church or the temple. So it's giving the rules and regulations for how that ought to be. Chapters 5 through 10, establishing the goals for the home. This tribe will take these areas and they will populate this from here to here and here to here. This tribe will take this area, populate here to here and here to here. This tribe will take this area, populate here to here and here to here. That's what's going to happen. That's the goal for the land. And that is the goal that Joshua then executes in the book of Joshua. Chapters 11 through 21, establishing the Father's strong hand. And here you have several episodes of Israel rebelling, Israel distrusting, and the Lord establishing his strong hand by punishing, but also offering grace. You also have several episodes in here where Israel gets into spats with other tribes and other nations in the wilderness. And the Lord establishes his strong hand there by bringing Israel, even in their sin and even in their disobedience from time to time, through those battles into victory. He establishes his strong hand against the enemies of Abraham. And those who bless you will be blessed, and those who curse you will be cursed. Chapters 22 through 25 are all about establishing discernment. This is more teaching about some of how the Levites, how the priests would use, how the priests would make decisions. Like how are the priests to decide about X, Y, and Z? It's how you establish discernment. And then chapters 26 through 36, establishing the rules for the home. Let me see here. Yeah. So again, it's coming back to once you're in there. Just remember all of these things. Remember, excuse me, the law of vows. Remember the laws of offerings. It's calling back to the things in Exodus and Leviticus. Once you're in there, don't forget, this is what you are to do once you take the land. And so with the book of Numbers, the people are getting reprimanded, the people are growing, the people are maturing, the people are being prepared to take the land and to come into their promised rest, their promised home. Which reminds us very much in the New Testament where the apostles will tell us, for the Lord reprimands those whom he loves. He disciplines those whom he loves. This is no different. You, any of you, may be in a period of your life, especially if you're a younger Christian, where you are in the wilderness right now. You know what the right way is, you know who God is, and you're learning more and more how to trust him with every single thing that comes your way. You might be in the wilderness, but he's calling you closer and closer to home. Which brings us straight into Deuteronomy. Any questions about Numbers or in the wilderness? I'm going to grab my water. I'll be right back. Keep thinking if you have a question. I'll be right back.
Yeah, that's the same question. A little bothered by that. Nothing.
Berating you for not having a question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Berating is a tough word.
Disciplining?
No. No, querying.
Yeah. Deuteronomy.
I just wanted, in Numbers, I did like the cities of refuge.
Yes. Yes. Tell us what the cities of refuge are.
It's where the Levites are put throughout the land, and the cities of refuge are places where someone can go if they accidentally hurt somebody else, so they would not get hurt back or killed by the family member that was put in charge of going to get them and bringing justice for the family.
It was an ancient idea. Was it lex talionis? I think is the phrase. An eye for an eye, and we see this pop up in the law. Mm-hmm. Now, an eye for an eye in Levitical law, in Mosaic law, is actually a restraint on evil, because the human inclination is you take my eye, I take both of your eyes. Mm-hmm. And so eye for an eye originally is a restraint. If somebody takes your eye, all you get is one eye in return. We're not doing this escalation thing. What it turned into, of course, was any offense, what's my right?
Yeah.
Which is actually why one of the greatest sacrifices that you can give is forgiveness, is grace. How can you most draw near to the Lord? Through forgiveness. Why? Because if somebody hurts you, you have the right to exact that justice upon them. It's built into creation, it seems.
Revenge.
Vengeance.
You are by forgiving, you sacrifice your right to vengeance.
And it's so hard.
It was really easy for Jesus to do, wasn't it?
If it makes you feel any better, it's hard for everybody in the room. You're just the only one that gave voice to it.
I think the reality is this. Donna, what you said is actually not even fully true. What is fully true is forgiveness really is impossible in some cases, except through the power of Jesus. Because he forgave that which could never be forgiven. And I think that's why I say that is the crowning sacrifice, is in our lives as Christians, is to give up our right to vengeance, to forgive. And in so sacrificing, when you forgive somebody, there's a line from Les Miserables right at the end of the book, and it made its way into the musical as well, which is, to love another person is to see the face of God. And I think that is completely correct. It's very much correct. It's very theologically packed. I would adjust it even to say, to forgive another person is to draw near to the Lord. It's not the only way one draws near, but it is absolutely the central way that God's people are given to draw near to him. If you feel far from the Lord, maybe you need to forgive somebody. I'm not saying that's the only reason that somebody could feel far from the Lord, but it'd be one of the first questions that I would ask. The cities of refuge, yes, very interesting, because it essentially teaches that.
Yeah.
It essentially teaches, yes, I know that everyone in the world takes an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, but you are different. You are a holy people. You are people who are going to major in forgiveness. And so, in order to restrain the evil of man's hearts, here are these cities that will protect they who ought to be killed by all other standards. God's standard is higher than ours. Deuteronomy, the main word you're going to remember with the book of Deuteronomy is that word, remember. The book of Deuteronomy is 3 speeches that Moses gives. That's the entire book. Moses gives 3 speeches, and they're all recorded in Deuteronomy. The word Deuteronomy, anyone know what Deuteronomy means in Greek? Deutero, second, nomi, law, second law. And the reason for that is it's basically all the law you read in Exodus, you're going to hear most of it again in Deuteronomy. In Hebrew, words. And that's because it comes from the first verse. Deuteronomy, verse 1. These are the words which Moses spoke to Israel across the Jordan in the wilderness. And so what's happened is Numbers has happened. The generation that has been told you're not going to go into the land has died off. And now they are prepared. Now they are ready. God has told Moses, you are not going into the land because you disobeyed me in the desert. But they have come right up to the precipice. When they cross the Jordan, in the book of Joshua, that's when taking the land begins. And interestingly, it's a much forgotten additional water miracle. When they cross the Jordan, the water spreads, much like crossing out of Egypt. So the water split for them to get out of slavery. The water split for them to come into their home. And so Deuteronomy, words, 3 speeches from Moses. The first speech, you look in the middle column, chapters 1 through 11, remember God's story with us. Moses basically just gives a history of Israel. 20 years ago, whatever it is. He gives a history of who we are, where we've come from, what God has done for us, what God has done through us, what God has done to us, especially when we deserved it. Remember who we are. We need reminding. The second speech, chapters 12 through 26. Remember God's covenant with us. This is where the name Deuteronomy comes from. This is the second giving of the law. Remember the rules. Remember the covenant. Remember the agreement we made with him. Moses does this in Deuteronomy. Joshua's going to do it when they conquer the nation. They stand and they pronounce all the blessings. When we follow the Lord, these good things occur within the nation of Israel. When we abandon the Lord, these horrible things are going to occur in the nation of Israel. Remember the covenant. Remember what we said we would look like. Remember what God has called us to be. He called to us. Remember the response that we have for him. Remember always to draw near. And remember the third speech, God's future for us. We are going into the land this is what he will do. Excuse me. Not only does Moses discuss what it's going to look like when they get into the land, he also discusses, excuse me, that Israel is going to fall away. He discusses that there will be another to come after him who will have seen God face to face, who will be like Moses but greater. Sounds a little bit mysterious. Maybe we'll come back to that at some point. Remember God's future for us. I have laid before you life and death. Choose life. Jesus does the same thing in the Sermon on the Mount. I have laid before you the rock and the sand. Choose the rock. So that's effectively, start to finish, that's what Deuteronomy is. Remember God's story. Remember God's covenant. Remember God's future. And in that remember God's future part, what does he say? You must, actually he says it in chapter 6, he says it throughout. In order to remember, you must pass this down. You must hand this off generation to generation to generation to generation. Which is why the key verse that I have there on the right, chapter 6, verses 4 and 5, this is pretty much the most significant saying in the Torah to the Hebrews. It's called the Shema. I've mentioned it before. Excuse me. Verses 4 and 5. Hear, O Israel. And in the NASB it says, O Israel, you should listen. I prefer Hear, O Israel. Hear, O Israel. Oh, no, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong verse. Verse 4. Hear, O Israel. The Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and all your might. I'm going to continue off of what's on the page. These words which I'm commanding you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your sons. You shall talk to them when you sit down in your house, when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise up. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand. They shall be as frontals on your forehead. You shall write them on the doorposts of your houses and your gates. And he goes on. The whole point is to say, remember, remember, remember. The Lord your God, the Lord is one. Everything I have told you, hand it down. Don't forget. Write it down wherever you need to write it down. Talk about it at breakfast. Talk about it when you wake up. Talk about it when you go down to bed. Train your children in this.
Go therefore and make disciples.
Go therefore and make disciples. Amen. Sounds a little familiar.
And that's what all of this is about.
Making
Is
disciples.
Not just making disciples, but passing it on to the next generation.
Yes. Which is, I think, just the best way of evangelizing. Making kids. Sorry.
Is that what we're going to go with?
When we're no longer recording, I'm going to tell a funny story. Fun fact, and actually, if you follow us on Facebook, you will have seen this already. The Shema, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. We add words in there to make it make sense in English, to make it make sense grammatically. In Hebrew, for the Lord your God, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. The Hebrew is Yahweh Eloheinu, Yahweh Echad. It's literally the Lord God, the Lord one. And this actually caused rabbis, before Jesus came onto the scene, to say to themselves, 3 names for God. How could these 3 be one? Fun fact. Yahweh Eloheinu is God. Yahweh is the Lord. So it's three God 3 times in a row. One. They have one. Love it. Fantastic. Beautiful. Amazing. And so when you read Deuteronomy, the word is remember. Why? Because we need to be reminded, and because we need to remind. We grow as disciples the more and more we are reminded of the truths of God. We make disciples the more and more we remind of the truths of God. The light is passed on to us, for us to then pass it on. And lastly, and this was Dave's main point for Deuteronomy. We are simply one of many generations. And we're going to come all the way back to Genesis now. In the book of Genesis, God creates everything. And then you see throughout the book of Genesis, this word pops up frequently. And you usually skip over these passages. Actually, I think the D-Life book actually just straight up has you skip over them. But like chapter 5, for example, and these are the generations of Adam. And then chapter 10, and these are the generations of Noah. Generations are creations. It's the creation. This is what Adam creates, is these people coming out of him. This is what Noah creates, this line of people coming out of him. That's another reason why the Gospels begin with what? Matthew and Luke have very early in them. Matthew starts with it, the genealogy, the generations that led to the creations of God, the creations of God and man working together to bring about the God-man, Jesus Christ. It's all the creative process, and it continues through into the discipling process. Go and generate disciples wherever you are.
Teach.
We do that by handing off the light generation to generation. And as we know, all of Israel agrees to what Moses says, and they never have any problems after that.
Oh yeah, if only it were so.
And as we know, that brings us to the end of the Torah, and it leads us right into what we'll be covering next time, which will be Joshua, Judges, and Ruth, which is what happens in the early going when a people who need to remember forget. Questions about Deuteronomy?
I just want to say that one of my go-to chapters that I refer to often is Deuteronomy 28, when I talk about Israel, because you get 14 verses in Deuteronomy 28 that talk about the blessings that God will pour out on a faithful Israel. And then, and I'm turning pages here, and then 15 through 68 are the curses that God will bring upon Israel when they are unfaithful.
Yeah.
Let's say if, it's when.
When.
It is very
And
much
when you mess up,
yeah.
this is what's going to happen. And I know I'm getting ahead of it, but if you look at the curses in chapter 28, you find that they happen.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's horrifying.
Actually, we were just reading, again in Judges, there's an incredible moment because it happens in Deuteronomy and then it happens again in Joshua where the curses and blessings are pronounced by the people of Israel. And in Joshua especially, they go into Shechem, which is between Mount Gerizim and Mount Ebal. And on Mount Gerizim, from thence comes the blessings. On Mount Ebal, from thence comes the curses. In the book of Judges, like we just talked about with Abimelech, Jotham, whose whole family has just been slaughtered by his half-brother Abimelech trying to take the throne, goes up onto Mount Gerizim and pronounces curses down on the people of Israel, or down on the people of Shechem. Implicitly, he is reminding them, you have forgotten the blessings that came from this hill. Look right over there, that's what's coming for you. Those 68 curses. And as you read through those curses, and if you do this, this will happen. Like the people of Shechem are doing half of those things right then and there. And I also think it's interesting because, yes, there's more attention given to all the curses. And the reality is this. The truth is simpler than the lie. The truth is the tree. And a lie is anything that's not on the tree. And so that can go in all sorts of different places. Lacking truth, lacking life, lacking love can look wildly different depending on who is sinning, who is walking away from that tree of life, as it were. And so the blessings are simpler.
And they're beautiful.
And they're gorgeous. And the curses are going to be much more numerous because there's so many ways that we can figure out to go wrong. When we talk about the creativeness of man, I can create meaning, I can create truth of myself. We are very, very creative, are we not?
Abundantly.
Yeah. Other questions or thoughts about Deuteronomy or the Torah as a whole? Yes, Donna.
So this goes back to Exodus. I didn't ask at the time because I was still kind of processing it, but we are saved. So is that referring to like our eternity, you know, like we have the means to be saved? Or is everybody saved no matter what? Or is
Think of Israel as you for a moment.
Mm-hmm.
Israel is brought out of slavery in Egypt. No matter how bad they get as a people, not an individual, as a people, do they go back to Egypt?
No.
No. They are saved.
Okay.
And they're not going back. They are being saved in the sense of they are being brought closer and closer and closer to God.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not going back to Egypt.
Even though they fight it and they seem to think that there's some positives to that, they don't go.
So that's not referring to our eternal salvation. That's referring to that.
So the thing about Exodus, this is actually a really important note for the whole Old Testament, but like very much the Torah. Everything in the Torah is a shadow of Christ.
Mm-hmm.
It is the shadow that Christ's person casts on history. And so the reason it's significant, what I just said, so we say, historically speaking, Israel was saved, and then the rest of the book of Exodus is they are being saved. That is a picture. Israel, both historically, as God tells his story through the people of Israel, both to historically produce Christ in history and to bring about salvation for many, and he does it through the story that he writes to show us what we are like. And I am not like any individual in Israel. I am like Israel. That's why Matthew makes such a big point of Christ is Israel. He is true Israel. And then you combine that with the Apostle Paul, we are being conformed ever more to the image of Christ. And so he is true Israel, as Israel should be. My life is to look more and more like him, which means, in a very real way, I'm looking more and more like Israel being saved. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so Israel exists both as a historical reality and a picture to show me what God and I am like. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Really, really good question, because it gets to something very important there. And that's another reason why reading these Old Testament stories are so helpful, because if you just read it as through the lens of history, like just purely facts and figures, then you get really bored really quick because, man, these guys just keep getting it wrong. That's why we laugh at Israel when we read about these stories, is because they just keep getting it wrong over and over and over and over again. But when we look at it and we say, this is the story that God is telling to me, and this is the story God is telling me to remember, and this is the story of the people that I am to look like in Christ Jesus, man, I look very similar to that. Thank you for the question. Great question, Donna. But that should be hopeful to you. No matter how bad it gets, Israel never goes back to Egypt. Other questions? Then I will conclude with excuse me, the bottom left bullet point on your sheet. Speaking of the shadows that we just talked about, Donna, as you read the Torah, as you understand the Torah, we always see Christ through it. Jesus Christ is our creator. We see that in Genesis. Jesus Christ is our Savior, shadowed in Exodus. Jesus Christ is both our high priest and our perfect sacrifice, which is shadowed in Leviticus. Jesus Christ is our king over the nation, which is shadowed in Numbers. Jesus Christ is the object of our remembrance, which is shadowed in Deuteronomy. Every single step of the way in the Torah, each book of the Torah, points to Christ in a different way. As you understand the Torah, you will understand Christ all the more deeply. And as you understand Israel, you will understand you all the more deeply.
So in the beginning, God.
And in the end,
And in the end-
remember.